Federal investigators conclude pilot error is the cause of the 2012 helicopter crash that killed 2 Atlanta police officers. The crowded field of Republican U.S. Senate candidates gathering on the same stage again tonight. They'll continue their series of debates in Macon. Military trucks on the move in Crimea carrying equipment and heavily armed soldiers, though the Russians have denied their armed forces are active. Spring forward after midnight tonight, we lose an hour. And coming up,
check the calendar and show a little respect for the women in your life. I'm Linda Alvin at the ABC News Foreign Desk with some details coming up.
This sports report brought to you by Car Connection at 6:45. Traffic and weather in 1 minute.
This is the Sangean WFR 28D portable internet DAB FM radio. I got this for my birthday this year, and currently, just to demonstrate one of the things this radio can do, I'm tuned into a news radio station from Atlanta, Georgia in the USA. It's streaming the station via my Wi-Fi internet connection. It connects to my Wi-Fi network, and I can stream radio stations from all over the world. As long as they stream on the internet, I can pick them up on this radio. It has a database of thousands and thousands of radio stations, and it's possible for you to create your own personal database of radio stations on the internet, and you can listen to them on this radio. This is a portable radio. It can use AC power or batteries. And the good news is it doesn't use some kind of proprietary battery pack that you have to purchase from Sangean. It takes 4 D-size batteries, and they can be either standard alkaline batteries or rechargeable. I have some Dick Smith brand batteries in there. They're not particularly great. They're quite cheap batteries actually. I get about 3 hours of use on internet radio mode with these batteries. I plan to buy some better quality batteries. I've been reading about some batteries from a company called Mahar Energy in America, and they have some very high capacity batteries available in D-size form that I can use with this radio. The radio can also receive DAB Plus radio stations, and it can also receive FM radio. The radio also has a USB port on the top, and you can plug in a thumb drive and play audio files from a USB thumb drive in various formats such as MP3 and Windows Media, etc. On the side of the radio here, on the left hand side, you get a few sockets. You get the power adapter input, headphone out, line and line in. So you could use this as an amplified speaker for, say, an iPhone, if you wanted to, or an iPod Shuffle, or iPod Touch, or a CD player even. It has a line output as well, as you could see, so you could connect this to a hi-fi stereo system and effectively use it as an internet radio and DAB tuner if you have a stereo system that doesn't already receive DAB digital radio stations or internet radio stations. The radio is based on the Frontier Silicon chipset. It's used on a lot of DAB and internet radios that are available now. So if you have other radios which use the Frontier Silicon Wi-Fi radio chipsets, you'll be somewhat familiar with this user interface. It's a very widely used user interface.
When it comes to the amount of money workers in the so-called STEM sector earn, Atlanta ranks number.
The radio can also receive FM radio stations, and it supports radio data service, or RDS. So if you're listening to a radio station that transmits RDS data, you'll get things like the name of the station and the name of the currently playing song and other data like that. Actually, this radio is not very good when listening to FM. This is not a good FM radio. And there are two reasons why. The first reason is the reception is actually not very good. It picks up the larger radio stations that transmit using very powerful transmitters, but it's not good if you live on the outskirts of a big city or if you're trying to listen to a community radio station. It's actually quite terrible. Also, the user interface when it comes to tuning into a radio station using manual tuning or auto-seek is a bit of a pain. I'm on FM currently, and listen to what happens when I start tuning up the band.
Which is approximately 29 kilometres from Kiev. Ukraine has many airports and make
Like a typical FM radio available in this part of the world, when you tune, it goes up by 0.5 of a megahertz, which is standard for FM radios in this part of the world. But you'll hear the sound cuts out a little bit as you turn the dial. So if you're rapidly scrolling, trying to find a station, it's going to take, you're not going to hear it when it scans.
Contest that's been on the air for years. Okay, picture it. The brainstorming meeting went something like this.
What if we record the sound and ask the listeners to guess what it is? And if they guess it right, they could win the cash.
And you can see that this radio station broadcasts RDS data. There's another problem, and it's, in my opinion, more serious. The radio does have auto-seek, but using the auto-seek is a pain. When you want to scan up the band to a higher frequency, you turn the dial clockwise. This dial on the side here, you turn it clockwise. Then, you press it like a button. Now you can see it's scanning.
electroconvulsive treatment.
And I'm pressing the button in, and it's scanning.
3534.
But if I want to scan down the band, I've got to turn the dial anti-clockwise, at least one click, then press it. And you can see now, it's scanning down the band. This is not intuitive at all. So, if you're going to buy this radio for listening to FM, save your money, buy something else. This is just not quite adequate. Really, it's like they added FM radio as an afterthought. This is really an internet radio and a DAB radio. Really. At the end of the day, that's what it is. It's not good for FM. And you can see it's not a very fast. It scans quite slowly too. It does take a little while for the radio to connect to wireless networks sometimes.
Airport whenever possible. Microsoft unveiled XP. In 2001, next month, the company plans to retire it. Microsoft Greg Sullivan tells All News it's just time to put XP out to pasture.
It's kind of time for those of us who have been on these systems that are over.
Finding radio stations on the internet using this radio is actually quite intuitive and it's quite easy. Let's say I want to listen to the BBC, for example, in England. I just turn the dial, and I turn the dial anti-clockwise to scroll down the menus, and turn the dial to clockwise to scroll up the menus.
Traffic center. Well, the major problems continue to plague us in the downtown connector. Northbound
you can see, and when I scroll down, I turn the dial anti-clockwise. I did find that a bit difficult to get used to. But let's say I want to try and find the BBC. I select stations, and I can search for a station. So we go here,
You're pretty clear.
And I just have to type on the little on-screen keyboard thing here, B,
looking at 9 minutes up to
B,
the 285 interchange. On Georgia 408 minutes will get you from downtown to 285. Next traffic update coming up at 7:06.
You have to scroll linearly through this list, and that is annoying, actually.
Thank you very much, Adam. Now the Fox 5 Storm Team forecast.
But you can do it.
Ken Cook. It's fair and cool tonight.
And now you'll see, it's come up with all the BBC radio stations. BBC Arabic.
65 to 71. Sunday night, lows down 44.
These are all the BBC stations.
Cool night. And then Monday, that'll be sunny and mild, quite nice.
My camera isn't focusing very well.
74 degrees. In Monroe, 67 and fair right now. In Fayetteville, it's 67 and fair. In Atlanta, it's 66 and partly cloudy at 6:58.
Going back to the MyVax and saying, you cost me a...
Warning, if you've recently declared bankruptcy, you're going to want to change the station. Because there's an alternative to bankruptcy, and it's faster than you'd ever think possible. But if you've already...
And then to select a station, you just press the button. And now it's tuning into BBC London.
BBC London 94.9, the latest traffic news, starting with some news just coming in at the M25 clockwise on the exit slip, junction 16 Godstone.
You can also add radio stations. If there's a station that you know of and it's not in the database, you need to create an account on the Frontier Silicon Wi-Fi radio portal. I'll provide a link for that in the video description if you need it, but it's just available on the internet. You've got to create an account, which is fairly easy to do, and then you register the radio on the website, and you can then type in the URL of the radio station you want to add. And I've already added one station that wasn't in the database, so let's see if we can find it. We go to the station list option and scroll down to my added stations.
Thank you so much.
And then you'll see here
Is BBC London
Blind Sports Radio. So I click on that. Now they might not be broadcasting right at the moment. I know that they'll be doing something later today, but oh yes, they're online.
Probably you've.
Oh no, they just
Drinks are departing the pitch.
Okay. Yes.
Wonder if Mr. Goodman got a nice warm glass of water out there.
Yes, he does like the warm water, doesn't he?
Now I had to add this station because it wasn't in the database.
That was a very amusing incident at the Sydney Carnival many years ago.
Oh yes. That might have been his last match. It was correct.
It certainly was his last match.
That incident caused that to be his last match.
It supports streams in a few different formats, things like MP3, Windows Media, Real Audio I believe is supported. I don't know, I'd have to look at the manual again, but I'm not sure if it supports AAC streams or not.
Things done his way.
Yes, he runs a tight hostel at home as well.
Yes.
They had an extra lodger, I think, for a day or so.
Save Harry.
You hear people talking about smartphones replacing, you know, your basic mobile phone, and smart TVs replacing regular TVs. You could say to some extent this is a smart radio, and it can be controlled with an app. I have here my iPhone 5S, and there are various things I can do with this radio using my iPhone. If you're going to do this, I actually recommend plugging the radio in, using the AC adapter. There's a setting in the menus which tells the radio to remain connected to your Wi-Fi network, even if you're not doing something that needs the radio to be connected. So, if you're listening to DAB radio or internet radio, the unit will usually disconnect from your network to save power. And that's especially important when you're running it on batteries. But you can have the radio constantly connected to your Wi-Fi network, and you can do things like control the radio. You can change stations, you can even change the mode that it's in, and you can get information about the currently playing radio station. So,
73% battery power.
and the good news is,
Swipe down with 3 fingers to reveal the notification center.
I'll just silence that. The good news is the app is for the most part accessible to those of us who are blind or vision impaired who use VoiceOver on our iPhones. And I do believe there's also an Android app available. The app is called Sangean. That's Sangean. You'll find it in the App Store. It's easy to find if you search for it. But I can do things like I can even control the volume of the radio.
Blind Sports Radio.
25 miles.
Sangean WFR. Blind Sports Radio. Now playing Voluminous Alert. Noted.
Yeah, enough said.
Blind Sports Internet Radio. Blind Sport. Sangean. Blind Sport. Now playing Voluminous 31%.
Well,
I can turn the volume on the radio down.
21%. 11%. 1%. 0%. 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%.
We didn't crash.
70%.
And yes, we were all out having a nudie pee, and as you may know, Lowie, I can take quite a long
40, 30, 20%. 30%, 40%.
I can even turn the radio off and on with the Wi-Fi network via my iPhone.
Yes, so the fun and games. And
again, for best results, you really need to have the radio plugged in and the keep network connection option, keep network connected option turned on.
My friends from uni, Mr. Lowe.
If I were to now change to DAB+, for example, the radio would eventually disconnect from my network and I wouldn't be able to control it from the iPhone.
It's wide out leg. Goodsman hits it down. He's taking a single, looking for two.
But as long as the keep network connected option is available, you can control the radio in most modes.
Blind Sports Radio EQ. Back button.
Half pitch.
Audio EQ. Settings. Tab.
Breeze picks up, so that's the
power. Switch button. Double tap to toggle setting. Off.
There we go. TikTok's going to work.
100.
100 apparently. Okay.
Actually, that's not going to work because.
All right, lads, we got.
Give me 2 seconds.
The 12th man, Mish is just firing up the 12th man.
Yeah, that isn't going to work because it's running on batteries.
Mr. Lowe organises the.
And because I haven't turned on that option.
And perhaps give it. Well, see if Gauzy
certainly when the radio is plugged in, I can turn it off with the app and turn it back on. And I think that's really quite amazing.
And we'll be back in around about 10 minutes, Mish.
The app needs a bit of work in terms of some of its quirks. It has a few little bugs. It takes a while to populate large lists of radio stations if you're in it, and large lists of files on USB thumb drives and things, but it does work. It is usable.
We're going with the Chapels, and if you don't like it, then piss off, and I'll get mode tab 2 of 5. Select. Now playing Voluminous button.
As I've said several times, the radio also supports DAB+, and I should mention, for those of you who live in a country that doesn't support DAB, there is another version of this radio called the WFR 28. It's pretty much the same as this, only it's a slightly different colour, and it doesn't support DAB.
Alex is heading to a tattoo convention in Sydney. Check out some sweet ink.
The WFR 28, I believe, is available in North America, and probably a few other countries too. And this is a reasonable DAB radio. The sound quality, of course, on DAB is a point of question for a lot of people. Some people find the sound quality on DAB plus radio to be objectionable. Some of the stations do sound a bit compressed and a bit yuck. I'm generally pretty happy with DAB radio. You certainly do get a very wide choice of radio stations. For example, ABC Melbourne on 774 kHz on the AM band broadcast quite a lot of different programming. On the weekends they have sports events on and lots of other programs. But one thing the ABC does that I actually think is very good, and I'll try and explain this to you. If you listen to 774 ABC Melbourne and you really don't like sport, there is a DAB station called ABC Grandstand, which will broadcast the sports programs that you would normally hear on 774 AM. And indeed on AM, 774 ABC Melbourne still broadcasts all the sports events they've always broadcasted in the past. But if you listen to 774 on digital radio, at times when sports events are on, you'll hear some alternative programming, interviews and music and things like that. But if you're mad about sport, you can tune to ABC Grandstand on digital radio, and you can listen to the sports programs normally heard on the ABC 774 AM station.
And the Wimmera district by sort of mid-late afternoon, and so that'll just bring the chance of some showers or thunderstorms. There's probably not much rain associated with that. They'll just be sort of high base.
And there's ABC Grandstand. My camera is not focusing very well on the small text.
A bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of triathlon-y kind of stuff.
That's a very good question about why you need it, so just don't bring that up with my wife.
I actually think Peter is more scientific and into his kind of technology to support him.
Don't really know what sort of program ABC Grandstand carries when there's no actual live sports events on. I think they play some pre-recorded content. I'm not really sure. But this is what's airing on ABC Grandstand right now.
Time on your fitness hobby than you do on your full-time job.
Can we not say that on the radio?
I'm not quite sure what this is. It's some sort of interview.
It to your, I won't say average man in the street, because...
And then on 774.
Thursday and Friday.
This is just
sounds
what's airing.
okay, so it's going to be hot, normal.
Yeah, hot, windy and wet for a day or so, and then sort of back to normal.
And I think this is probably also broadcasting on 774 AM.
Better throw a few spanners in the...
When you run the radio on the mains and you switch it off, you get the current time of day displaying on the screen. And you can also set an alarm to wake you up at a certain time, and of course you've got the option that allows the radio to remain connected to your Wi-Fi network, even when it's in standby mode. It's running on batteries now, and when you're running the radio on batteries and you switch it off, the radio turns completely off. So now it's completely switched off. It's not in like a standby mode. This is just to prevent the radio from unnecessarily draining your batteries, which is important. And this thing is a bit of a battery sucker as it is. So, if you're going to use this as an alarm clock, you need to keep it connected to mains power at all times. And of course, being a DAB radio, it will automatically set the clock, because the DAB radio stations transmit date and time information to your radio. In fact, you can select to have the radio receive the date and time settings from the internet, from DAB, or from FM radio stations that broadcast date and time information via RDS. I have a Sangean clock radio that's not a DAB radio, it's just standard AM and FM. It has RDS support, but I find that the radio stations which transmit date and time data only seem to transmit it every so often, and it can take a while for the radio to receive that information. I think now it's probably time to draw some conclusions about this radio and give you some pros and cons. Overall, I absolutely love this radio. I'm so glad I got it. I was wanting this for my birthday, and I'm very glad I received it. The good points about this radio: that built-in speaker sounds amazing. It has very good sound quality. It can deliver a lot of bass, and you do have bass and treble controls. The radio is relatively easy to use. The display is nice and clear and easy to read. The radio is packed with features galore, and it's quite an attractive, compact unit. The downsides are these. When you use headphones, particularly on batteries, and I tend to use headphones a lot, you hear a lot of electronic noise in the sound. You hear a lot of low-pitched rumbling, humming noises, and also a bit of crackling and hissing and things going on. I think what's probably happening is the microprocessor and the other electronics in the radio are interfering with the amplifier. for the headphone output, and that can be a little bit annoying. I kind of wish it didn't do that. FM reception, as I've also said, is not fantastic. In fact, using this as an FM radio is more than a bit of a lost cause. I wish this radio had a key lock switch. I have over there, you might be able to see, just up on the shelf there, a Sangean DPR 69 Plus, which is quite a popular portable digital radio, and for good reason. It's a very good radio. I take that radio with me on trips when I go away, and it's really great to be able to lock the buttons so that the radio won't accidentally switch on in my bag and run the batteries down. This has no key lock, so I can't lock the buttons on this radio, preventing it from switching on in my backpack. So the only way to prevent this radio from turning on inadvertently in a bag or suitcase is to take the batteries out. Also, it does take a little while to start up, particularly when it's running on the battery. You press the power button, you do need to wait about, I'd say, 20 to 30 seconds for the unit to power on. And when you're in internet radio mode, it takes at least a minute to fully start up from a cold boot, because it takes a while for it to connect to your wireless network. I'm now in internet radio mode, and you will see that it will take a little while to connect to the wireless network, because it needs to get an IP address and all that sort of thing. And you'll see that it takes a little while.
Defensive one there, or they're looking for
You only have 5 presets per band. 5 on FM, 5 on DAB, and 5 on internet radio. You can set up a favourites list of internet radio stations, but this is done via the website, not on the receiver itself, as far as I know. Which is a bit of a disappointment. It would be nice if you could add stations to an on-the-fly favourites list on the unit itself, but I don't believe you can do that. Sangean don't really give you any idea in the manual of how long the unit will last on batteries and how long it will take to recharge batteries, and I think this is greatly dependent on the capacity of batteries you have. The batteries I have in this radio are 2,150 milliamp hour batteries. And as I say, the unit will last typically 3 to 4 hours on a full charge in Wi-Fi mode on those batteries, and it takes about 3 hours to charge them. As I said earlier, I'm interested in purchasing some Maha Energy Power X batteries, which have a capacity rating of, I believe, 11,000 milliamp hours. I contacted Sangean about those batteries to ask them if this radio will be able to support them, and they seem to think that this radio will work fine. They suggested that those batteries should last around 40 hours in this radio. I've had discussions about this with my sister's boyfriend. He seems to think those claims are a little bit optimistic, but I see it as this. Even if those batteries last for 15 hours, that's still better than what I'm getting currently, so I'm certainly going to look into purchasing those batteries. Sangean seem to think that the Power X batteries will take about 16 to 18 hours to recharge in this radio. And that's the other thing I like about this radio. If you use rechargeable batteries, you can charge them up in the radio. You don't need a dedicated battery charger. So on the whole, this radio gets my stamp of approval. I really do like it, and I'm very happy that I now have one. And I'm sure that I'm going to get a lot of hours of use out of this radio. Thanks for watching, and feel free to leave a comment if you have one.